Hello again, friends, and you are our friends. And good morning. Welcome to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here, wherever it is that you pull up to each and every week to download it or stream it. And I guess those are really the two main options. Watch it on YouTube. Watch the Travis Heckel artwork sit still on YouTube. But the way it works is we answer your questions that are sent in a number of ways, including via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com or on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. If you tweet at me and say, how do I submit a question? Just listen to the show. Start by doing that. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and the man who's going to be answering your questions, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Oh, good
morning, Jim. How are you today?
Oh, fucking hell. So's your old man.
What? Hey.
That's a fucking... Oh, so you can watch the Travis Heckel artwork sit still and fucking playing the harpsichord as you have already browbeaten people before I've even drawn a breath here, as if I didn't have enough fucking issues. Because, I thought this was going to be the day, Brian.
The day?
I thought this was going to be the day. This was going to be the day because normally I am in somewhat of a surly mood when we do this fine program it just so happens it works out that, and part of it is on a weekend that we record this, and things seem to accumulate. But in some respect, some fucking cretinous humanoid or situation or moment has put me normally in a surly mood. My sensibilities have been offended. I've been put in some type of state by someone owing me something or making some stupid remark or putting out some bogus outlaw mud show product, whatever the case may be. But in this case, I thought it was going to be different because this morning, and I'll tell you, and it started out rough, 5 or 6 o'clock this morning with the thunderstorms, the thunder and the rain. But then by the time I was ready to get out of bed on this fine Sunday morning, I could see the sun coming out. And it was peeping through the curtains. The sun was peeping. And there was little Harley Quinn. And she was curled up on my shoulder there with her nose right next to my ear where I could just turn over and give her a little kiss on the snout, good morning. And then I waved at Stacy, because if you startle her when she's asleep, you could get a right cross or a fucking moose kick. You never know what so I waved at her gently because she was asleep. And I look out the window. And there, out the bedroom window, I see our new little baby deer, yet to be named.
I was going to say, did we settle on a name yet for the new?
We have not. The perfect new baby deer name has not come up as of yet. So right now it's new baby deer. Is curled up under the tree outside the bedroom window, just a sleeping, just a snoozing and a sleeping. And there's mama deer about 10 feet away, just kind of standing guard, just hanging out. And another member of the family, another one of the full-grown ones, is down by the stream where I just hauled 80 pounds of deer feed and a nice little salt lick for them. And, got to keep mama deer's energy up here. She's nursing. So I've hauled that down there. So they had a nice little breakfast buffet and the little baby deer sleeping there. And the birds are twinkling. There's even a couple of fat old groundhogs hopping across trying to steal that deer food.
They hop?
Well, they're just they don't hop like a kangaroo, but they don't actually just walk gracefully like a deer. They kind of hump. I don't,
You didn't go to rabbit. You went to kangaroo when talking about.
Well, a kangaroo or a rabbit, but I mean, the most notable hopping. Well, nevertheless, anyway, it was a picturesque scene here at Castle Cornette. The gate is closed. The drawbridge is down. The crocodiles are out in the moat. I'm in for the day. I've got a lot of business to transact running this multimedia empire where people so often piss me off. But this was a good day. And I get on the Twitter machine just for a few minutes. There's where I may have made my fatal mistake. But I get on the Twitter machine just for a few minutes. And Lance Storm had tweeted here recently, over the last day or so, his recollection of having watched the OJ Simpson Bronco chase in the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. I think they were talking about it was either the anniversary of the murders, because as we all know, the chase has not come up till, when is that, Wednesday or so? Anyway, nevertheless, I digress. He watched it, and I wrote him back, and I said, yeah, the motherfucker still owes me money, because everybody else was doing the same thing, right? And then an OJ Simpson account with OJ Simpson's picture, and says, OJ Simpson, whatever the fuck his number was or whatever, goes, hey, I don't owe anybody any money, sort of. It's obviously not the real OJ Simpson, right? Although he does have 19,000 followers from people stupid enough to think it's the real OJ Simpson, apparently, or elsewise they just like what he fucking does. I don't know. Possibly he skewers the former felon and fucking freed murderer, whatever the fuck. But anyway, I write him back. I've put it in the tweet box there, whatever you call that procedure. And then I write him back.
You tweeted.
Well, yes, but I mean, his is in the box where it's you see his and then mine.
You retweeted the quote.
Don't fuck with me this morning, kid. I'll unleash anyway.
Said OJ Simpson.
So yeah, say, hey, boy, I tell you what, that was a cutting remark. But I want to tell you, at any rate, I said, hey, I didn't even say motherfucker. I said, hey, you should have waited, either done it on Thursday or whatever the fuck, or waited till Saturday to goddamn getting that Bronco OJ. Because Friday was wrestling night in Knoxville, and they were all sitting home watching your shit show for free instead of paying to see mine. Because I just thought that was a thing that I would say to O.J. Simpson if O.J. Simpson had a Twitter. This guy is obviously a parody. It's not really O.J. Simpson. And I didn't think anything else about it because I thought that was a fun, witty Twitter. Twat. Whatever the past tense is.
Well, part of the story is OJ really is apparently now on Twitter.
Well, here's the goddamn problem. This is what put me in a sour fucking mood. I get on Twitter just to look just moments before we go on the air here, just to make sure that everything's all right in the world. And I knew that it wasn't, and I got that confirmed. But hundreds of people have written me, Jim, that's a fake account. Jim, that's not really OJ. Jim, that's what... Well, of course, it's not fucking O.J. Simpson, you dumb shits. That was the whole point. Because I was smart enough to know that wouldn't be O.J. Simpson. Because for one thing, I looked at the thing and he didn't have a blue check mark and it looked sketchy as fuck, even if he did have 19,000 followers. But for the second thing, there's no goddamn way that O.J. Simpson, a fucking guy who got away with a double homicide, a vicious double homicide of the mother of his children with his bare hands with a knife, and got away with it when he was obviously guilty, and then continued to try to plead his innocence until he actually did go to jail for doing another stupid thing, which was a strong arm robbery. And he served time in prison, so he's a convicted felon. And then they had to let him out of fucking jail because there's only so much time you can serve for strong-arming merchandise featuring a fucking disgraced former fucking NFL superstar, your own shit. There's only so long you can spend in jail there. So now I'm figuring certainly to God he has slunk, and he owes the Goldman family tens of millions of dollars in judgment for wrongful death for slaughtering their son in the fucking street. So certainly this guy has gone off to a fucking island somewhere and is goddamn completely out of proper human civilization. And if he didn't learn the first time you get away with murder and you still fuck up and get sent to jail for something else, then certainly he's learned now to just hide. And that's how I knew that was a fake O.J. Simpson account, and it was all part of my plan, Smithers. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks that I really think that I was talking to and some other people think that it really is O.J. Simpson, because they were like, well, I can't believe that I wake up to see Jim Cornette bantering on Twitter with O.J. Simpson. Because it's not. It's Jim Cornette battering assaulting and battering a fake OJ Simpson on Twitter because of the aforementioned all the things that I included the fact that, no, you can't let this fucking guy on Twitter. He's obviously gone. He's underground. He's hiding. He's not going to make these fucking mistakes again until I find out he really is on Twitter. Not only is OJ Simpson really on Twitter, but he has like 200 and something thousand followers. Now, besides the fact that it blows my mind that you can be a convicted felon and a guy got away with murder and owe tens of millions of dollars in fucking judgments and be a pariah and the name associated with a punchline and a disgraced superstar, et cetera, and that you would want to get on Twitter or that anybody would want to fucking follow you there. But anyway, and now here's the problem. If I would have said that to him because actually I wrote a column, I believe it was for Fighting Spirit one time, where I mentioned the correlation between OJ Simpson owing me $5,000 and creating Stone Cold Steve Austin, because that was the night that it killed the house with Jake the Snake and the Dirty White Boy after the hot angle for the Smoky Mountain title. And then Jake got mad at the payoff, and so he fucking no-showed. And the title was taken off of him and put back to the Dirty White Boy, and he went underground instead of doing something. We did a 6 degrees of separation where finally Jake fucking creates Stone Cold, but he wouldn't have had he not fucking no-showed me in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And so therefore OJ Simpson owes me $5,000. That was the amount on the gate that I was expecting and from what I got. And he helped create Stone Cold Steve Austin. We did a while back. We did it. Maybe on the website, JimCornette.com. But any goddamn way. So now I would retweet it to the actual real OJ and say that. But then it would reinforce in people's minds that I've thought that I was doing it the first time to the real OJ and I made a mistake. So I'm conflicted about what to do.
If you don't know what to do, call Stephen P. New.
Yes, we'll sue. If you don't know what to do, folks, you need to sue. And if you need to sue, you need to call Stephen P. New. And I'm going to tell you what, I got his phone number. He's on speed dial, the way I talk about people. 888-692-8084 is the number to call. Or if you'd like to get on the interwebs, New Law Office, NEW. He's brand new, but he's not new at law. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084 for representation by someone that's one of us. He's one of the cult to Cornette. He's the consigliere, as a matter of fact. That's probably a lousy Italian pronunciation. He's one of us. He roots for the little guy. He's one of us. He knows, he tells people that Donald Trump can go piss up a rope. Somebody enjoyed that expression when I used it last week or whenever. And he's one of us in that he is a wrestling fan. But here's the thing. You know why this law gets so complicated, don't you? Why the laws are written and you try to read these law books and these attorneys have to go to school for fucking years and years and years to be able to decipher this fucking who shot John bullshit that's written in all these law books, the way that these laws are written. They make it that way so only the fucking rich people can afford the really smart lawyers that can read all that who shot John bullshit. And that's how the rich people, such as O.J. Simpson, before he slaughtered 2 people in the middle of it, well, it wasn't in the middle of the street, it was in the middle of their house, I mean, the street, but their sidewalk. That's how he got off, because he hired the dream team. And it's not often that the little guy has a chance to fucking hire somebody that can sort through all this fucking hogwash and get to the meat of the matter. Because you can come in and say, hey, Judge, I got an arrow sticking through my chest, and Sam there's the one that stuck it through here. But if Sam's a multimillionaire, well, he can find the law that states that he was within his right to stick that thing right straight through there because you were standing on his property line. He'll find something because he's a bigwig and he can afford the dream team. Well, now all of you folks can afford Stephen P. New because he takes cases that he knows that he can win. Cases from people that have been downtrodden, put upon, talked bad about, inconvenienced, damaged, hindered, nettled, or engaged in the undercurrent of malfeasance with. He takes those folks and he stands up for them, and he knows all the big words in those books, and he can turn it around and use it on these big corporations. So don't feel like you have to be a multimillionaire to have a great lawyer that can fucking represent you in court, because Stephen P. New is a champion of the little guy. He's not one of these. If he'd been on the other side, instead of, what was her name, Marsha Blackburn? No, that's that fucking twat in Tennessee. Marsha Brady. Marsha Clark. If Stephen P. New had been standing alongside Marsha Clark, well, she wouldn't have been standing there. He could have done it all by himself. Stephen P. New would have put OJ Simpson in jail the first time so that they wouldn't have had to fucking catch, like they caught Capone on income tax evasion. They get OJ Simpson for a strong arm robbery in a casino. He would have put him away the first time. Stephen P. New. That's what I've got to say about that.
As a collector, what do you think of the idea of losing some of your personal items because you have to repay the debts of the people that you murdered to their family? You have to repay the debt.
Yeah.
And then you try to recapture your, again, look at it from the collector's point of view.
No, as a fucking collector, fuck you. For one thing, it wasn't even shit that I probably, except for a few things, prize my vintage wrestling collection more than the stuff actually of my career itself, with the exception of a few things. But so he wanted his own shit back that he had to fucking sell or pawn or put out there or tried to hide and lost control of, or however it was that it escaped his possession, because he was trying to hide and not pay the fucking family of the guy that he murdered along while he was murdering his wife, and got a bonus too for. Fuck him.
Okay, well, let's...
And feed him. Here's the thing. Even if he felt like he had to do it that bad and he got away with it, you get away with that. You kill two people and you go through a trial and a judge says not guilty, or the jury says not guilty, and you don't have to go to jail for this. Are you going to spit on the sidewalk again? Are you going to walk out in public and take the chance on bumping into somebody and them screaming assault? Are you going to fucking do anything in any way out of the way to press your fucking luck if you're not a goddamn mental fucking lunatic? Which, by the way, apparently he is, because he knifed two people to death in the middle of the fucking sidewalk.
All right, so let's change the scenario a little bit. Let's say you just got out of prison for, killing Terry Landell. And somewhere in that...
Now, if it had been Terry Landell on that sidewalk, they would be given an OJ Simpson parade down fucking Times Square instead of, yeah. No, it depends on the fucking context. But go ahead with your...
Well,
with your simile.
You lose a civil suit. You're in a hotel years later in Las Vegas with some of your boys. And you hear that they're upstairs selling everything from the vault. It's not just your personal items. It's the things you collected. They have every issue of Wrestling As You Like It. They're selling it upstairs right now. What do? You haven't thought about that, had you?
Oh, for heaven's sake. Now that's never going to come up. Maybe.
Well, let's get you in a happy mood. Let's get our first question here, Jim. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John in Germany. It's entitled, Give Omega a Chance.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Jim, what would it take for Kenny Omega to make up and gain your respect for wrestling a blow-up doll? I get it, that it was stupid, even for independent wrestling. But he's put on some hellacious matches recently versus Jericho, whom I know you respect. If Jericho endorses Omega, can't you take another look? When he wrestled the doll, he was a nobody, trying anything but he has worked his ass off to become a real star that no longer has to do that stupid shit. He got over in Japan, which ain't that easy for an American wrestler. He was Canadian. Let's be honest, some really good wrestlers have stooped to doing some really stupid shit. Mick Foley talked to a sock puppet. Dustin Rhodes painted himself like a giant gay Emmy Award. And I don't even have any clue what the hell Bray Wyatt is doing playing some sadistic Mr. Rogers. And if WWE is ever going to get its shit together and improve its product, rooting for Kenny Omega and AEW might be necessary. A lot of great wrestlers had stupid gimmicks before they figured it out. What do you say, Jim? Give Omega another chance?
Well, now that it's been phrased that way, I'm going to give Kenny Omega another chance.
Really?
I gave him this chance a while back and he didn't take it, so I'll give him this chance again. For wrestling the blow-up dolls and the little girls, which he did on more than one occasion, he can either drop dead or he can blow me. There's another chance. He could do either one of those two things. I don't care. No, fuck him. And here's the thing. Brian, tell me why the fuck that this guy is the second coming of Terry Funk or the second coming of Ric Flair or the second coming of anyone that anybody ever said was the greatest wrestler in the world at any point up until this guy. I don't like that whiny voice. I don't like those goofy facial expressions. I don't like that Ultimate Warrior-ish whole fucking shake head fucking vibe thing he's got going on. The hair's goofy. Every time I read the transcript of an interview with him, because I can't listen to that voice for that long, because I can't take anything he says seriously because he's always making goofy faces. In one of the recent magazines, I read a transcript of an article with him, and as I mentioned, it sounded like he thought that he was Laurence Olivier on the stage at the fucking Hammersmith instead of the goddamn supposed professional fighter simulating conflict. I don't think that we would like to hang out with each other in person. I think we are another of the thinks of each other, thinks of things in a completely opposite fashion. And did I mention, fuck him. He shouldn't have got this fucking far to be given these chances because he wrestled blow-up dolls and 7-year-old girls in front of fucking fans. I don't care whether he's a nobody or not. If you don't have any more respect for yourself or what you do than that, even when you are a nobody, you'll always be a fucking mush-brained fucking sap-sucking idiot. And that's what he comes off as to me. So I'll give him another chance. He can either drop dead or blow me. Because I don't care if he brings fucking Luthez back from the dead and stretches him. I cannot seriously consider Kenny Omega as a professional wrestler, much less a great one. And explain to me when the last time that he had a match approaching anything, approaching the standard of anything that any of the other people who have always been called the greatest wrestler of all time ever did.
I'm sensing that this Christmas season we're going to have Drop Dead or Blow Me t-shirts in the store. It's a heck of a new catchphrase.
But Brian,
he had that one year where he had the matches with Okada, and those are pretty spectacular matches, and that's why people rave about him so much, is that he has these really athletic wrestling matches with lots of near falls, and people go crazy over him. But it hasn't been a long run, if that's what you're saying. He had those matches. I wasn't a big fan of the Jericho matches, and he hasn't done much since.
I thought when I watched him and Jericho, because I wanted to see Jericho, Jericho did a good job of convincing me that he meant what he was doing, and Omega just sets up his performance. So I'm sorry.
All right. Well, our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Mike. I have a question. Who the fuck was Clarence Mason, and how did he get a job?
You know, and I wish I could remember the entire. I was filled in on this. Clarence Mason was a real attorney. And he was also a wrestling fan. And if I'm not mistaken, he may have been a practicing attorney in the Texas area. But did I mention he was also a fan? And some way or another, a tape, or he got the attention of somebody who liked the idea enough of a takeoff on, you know, because that was just a couple of years after the whole OJ thing. Well, it was at when was the verdict finally? Didn't it take a couple of years? So it was hot, 96, 97. The Dream Team and Johnny Cochran, and because Clarence Mason obviously was not his given Christian name. It came from it at that time, or in Vince's mind. The two most famous attorneys were Clarence Darrow and Perry Mason. So Clarence Mason, if anybody hadn't figured that out yet, that was his, you know, pun. Did you know that, Brian?
I did.
Okay. Well, thankfully, you know, but anyway.
Because Vince isn't known for his well thought out puns.
But exactly. But anyway, so here's this little guy. And you know, once again, that's the way that Oscar, a Men on a Mission, got a spot in the wrestling business in the WWF, which it was the only place he had ever performed at that point in time when he started there, because he jumped out of the elevator at Vince at a WrestleMania in the hotel or something and rapped for him, the rap that he had come up with about wrestling. And so since this was the first time that Vince McMahon had ever seen a rapper, especially in person, and I like Oscar, but that statement is still true, that would have been the first time that Vince McMahon would have ever seen it. He thought, oh, well, this is good, pal. And they built a tag team around Oscar jumping out and rapping at him. And so it's a tribute to Oscar. But the same thing, a fucking lawyer, pal, you know, it's hot, you know, and suddenly they announced I was getting a lawyer, an attorney, the WWF. He was coming to the WWF, and I was going to be I was his first client there, was Clarence Mason. And I can't remember what the fuck we did. What the fuck was it? That was where because I'm like, God damn it. Okay. You know, I didn't dislike the guy. He was a very nice guy, but all of a sudden here's somebody who's never been in the wrestling business before and is going to be in our segments. And I've got to, hopefully, because I was not as a part of the creative team, that was just one of the many things that, you know, Vince would push on us that we wouldn't necessarily have done ourselves, but on camera performing in my segment, okay, I've got to try to make special care that these things don't go south, because then it'll be my particular on-air segment stinking. Nobody knows who's writing this shit. But so once again, I'm not knocking Clarence, and I can't even remember his real name, but he was kind of just happy to be there at the start and was a little intimidated by the whole thing. Later on, he did some work with the Nation of Domination, and he kind of got, you know, he had to, if he'd stuck with it for a number of years, he probably would have done but he probably made more money being a fucking lawyer, you know, after that little run. But that was the first time was when, whatever the reason I'd retained him, I told Vince, I think it was Vince in the ring, I said, let me explain something to you. This guy, he's the best lawyer in the world. He's been writing writs all morning. If you've read the writs he's written, you'll know they're really well-written writs. And just to see if I could crack Vince up, right? And, but anyway, and then Clarence was around. God, no, you know what? It was early 96. What even 97? It was early 96, maybe late 95. Because also, Clarence was with me when I did the promo with Piper at the Louisville pay-per-view, which was in February of 96, as I recall. So, it was a whole play on the whole OJ Simpson, Johnny Cochran, Dream Team. This guy's a lawyer and a wrestling fan. Somebody brings him to Vince's attention. A lawyer, pal. He really is. There you have it.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Harvey W McCarthy. Why isn't Tony Garea in the WWE Hall of Fame? 5-time tag team champion, road agent for decades.
Okay, I don't know. You don't see Tony Garea do any of the fan fest. He lives, I think he probably still lives in the same house that he was living in the 90s, which I think was the same house that he had been living in for like 20 years when he moved up there. And Tony Garea and Dean Ho, right? In fucking 1974 were the tag team champions. He was the fiery New Zealand babyface. I think he moved in there and just stayed. And he did at the time that I went up in 93, he had already, retired from the ring, but was one of the agents. I'd be lying. I didn't have that much problem with Tony, but Tony, he was very dry. He could be dickish to the underneath guys. He'd kind of lift the eyebrow a little bit. He didn't go out of his way to really bust his ass to help anybody. Except if it was somebody he was naturally in favor of. But he was never really. He wasn't the top agent either. He wasn't a Jack Lanza. He wasn't a Pat Patterson. He was more like, if there was two towns, Dave Hebner would be in one and check it up at the box office, and they might ask Tony to do the other stuff or take care of the underneath guys or the job guys' payoffs or whatever. So, I haven't seen him or heard of him back at WWE events in years. I don't know whether there was a acrimonious departure or if he just decided to retire and don't give a fuck, but you don't see him around any of the fan fests or reunions either, do you?
Well, you do a little bit lately. I think you did CNC.
Well, they go for the guests that you don't normally get. So there you go.
In terms of the agents that were there when you were there, who was hated by the wrestlers the most? You had Chief Jay Strongbow, Rene Goulet, Tony Garea, Jack Lanza. Was George Animal Steel an agent at that time, or was that after?
Yes. No. The guys loved George Steele. I loved George Steele. We used to ride together sometimes. Jack Lanza was a fucking treat. Loved him. Pat was always great to work with, and he obviously, because of his tenure and how long he'd been on creative and or the top agent, he was Vince's right-hand guy. And Strongbow was just so full of shit. He was he sat around a big fat tub, just so full of shit. And he would book the job guys there at first, I think probably late 80s, early 90s. That's how the Hardys were there when they were underage, because they went with the Italian Stallion. He'd get somebody in each area that had guys they could pile in the car, and he'd take part of the fucking money and, blah, blah, blah. Or he'd always just sit around and take the piss out of everybody and everything and like that. And the classic stereotype of the old timer that doesn't particularly like anything. But because of his importance to Vince Sr. and in the 70s, he was hot there. Holy fucking hell. I've seen the footage. I don't know how they managed to get fucking Chief Jay Strongbow over at that age, and he wasn't even a real fucking Indian. And it was so fucking hokey. But anyway, Strongbow was just, he wasn't on everybody's hit parade as far as people you'd like to hang out with for fun.
What about Rene Goulet?
Sarge was fun. Sarge, I loved it because I'd grown up, he and Don Fargo were the Legionnaires in Sergeant Jacques Goulet in Indianapolis in 1975. I saw them live with Bruiser and Crusher. So 20 years later, I'm working with Sergeant Jacques. I couldn't call him Rene at first. I was like, but no, he was a nice, and he was another one of the underneath agents. And that's not saying, but he would switch back and forth between having underneath matches at TV, or sometimes he'd be checking up at the box office at house shows or whatever. He wasn't, the top agents really were George Steele, Jack Lanza, and obviously Pat transcended that at that era.
When a lot of fans hear the term agent for wrestling, they think of some of the guys that, let's say, recently left WWE, like Arn Anderson, Dean Malenko, guys who work over the matches with the guys before they go out there. What actually are the responsibilities and the job responsibilities of an agent?
Well, and see, once again, if you're talking about the 80s and 90s version, I mean, we didn't even have agents in the NWA for Crockett, or then when TBS bought the company, it was Dusty the booker and JJ the assistant, or the booking committee, anybody on creative, whatever. But agents became popular in the WWF because of the extra money that they spent on television and television production, and it meant more, etc. So basically, the agents then at house shows, you'd have one or two agents for the whole night, and like if it was Dave Hebner and Jack Lanza would handle all the matches, and Hebner would check up at the box office and work with the building. Because then you were going up, especially on a house show, you were going up to Jim and Brian. You got 20 minutes. They just played the angle on TV that y'all did here locally last week or whatever. So it's hot, boom, boom, boom. Jim, you go over. Fuck him some kind of way. Because all the guys were fucking professionals. They knew what they were doing. You didn't need to sit and talk through a match with a guy. For television, even back then, by the early 90s, you had the agents were veteran wrestlers that had been loyal to and worked with in money drawing spots, Vince Sr. or Vince Jr. in some capacity, that understood the business and also had been there long enough to understood how the television worked, because you still had experienced guys. Jack Lanza could go to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Well, maybe that's a bad example. Jack Lanza could go to Mick Foley and The Undertaker and say, okay, you guys, you're on TV or on pay-per-view or whatever. You got 20 minutes. How do we want to go about this? And they would talk about their match, and the agent would sit with them. And he would suggest things, but it's not like you didn't have to put a match together for Mick Foley and The Undertaker. They would ask him, hey, might we, fucking anally impale each other with metal spikes? Nah, Vince probably ain't going to go for that. But if it was something they could sell him on, then he could go sell to Vince, hey, they want to do this. Is it okay? And also a lot of times with the younger guys, the agents would help them remember to work television, where the cameras are, what they're doing on their entrance, how long they've got. When we give you the cue to go home, this is your finish. Do you need 3 minutes for it, or you need 4? And stuff like that, because the agent, especially in modern day in a big company where guys are still, fairly experienced, but, sometimes still younger, they help work now with the production truck. They're the bridge between the production truck and the wrestling in the ring. If something's going to happen that, would surprise, that shock the shit out of most normal TV directors, a guy's suddenly going to be shot out of a fucking cannon, or he's going to fly backwards out of the fucking ring, we'd like to see it on television. The director's going to need to know that. Well, that's the agent's job. It's something that needs to be covered on television in the match. The agent hears it, and then he goes and sits in the truck or deals with the producer and the director and making sure that they don't miss it. Because that happened a lot in the 80s before there was a position like that. Because the fucking directors a lot of time weren't smart. And even if they were, they don't know, this guy's running across the ring and suddenly he fucking falls over the top rope because the other guy pulled it down. We didn't even see that guy. That was the idea. It was supposed to be a surprise, but not to the fucking TV director. So gradually that position has become more important, but not even more important, but more detailed. Back then it was, the agent had, the finishes, who goes over and make sure they don't do anything to get us sued. And now there's a lot more detail involved. That's why there's always somebody with a lot of experience in that position.
The agents would handle the draws, right? The advance money for the wrestlers?
Well, whoever was handling the box office, whichever agent was at the box office, would handle the draws. So, and once again, now people say, because I never saw anybody take a draw in Memphis. It happened every once in a while when the top guys said, hey, I need some cash. But when I went to Louisiana, it was written on the bottom of the booking sheet, no draws unless approved by office. And I was like, what the fuck is a draw? I've never even been offered one. But when you were on the road and you needed cash, they would give you a draw, some amount of money against your payoff for the night. So let's say you were in Baton Rouge and you need to draw, they gave you $50. And if your pay was going to be $200 when you got your check, it was 200 minus 50, 150. Well, the WWF, the guys, I normally never took draws. I always brought cash with me on them because if you take draws, then your check is smaller and you lose track of it. A lot of guys drawed themselves into fucking, they put the draws over finally in the end. They did enough draws, they were doing the job.
It's a great way of putting it.
Yes, but anyway, but in the WWE, because, or F in those days, the guys had been for 10 years, had been used to being on the road constantly and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. So it was just an automatic thing. They came up and tried to give me draws. I was like, I don't need one. What? I was the only one that wasn't taking one. What the fuck? You turned down a draw? We don't understand. So I'll give me the goddamn thing. But whereas before in territories, when I got into business, if you really you didn't like to do it, and it wasn't really a thing that most offices encouraged. Hence why I'd never seen anybody do it in Memphis. And once again, you had to get office approval to do it in Louisiana. But some places, like it was automatic because they were on the road a lot and everybody was making a lot of money. But whoever was handling the box office would then bring the cash back and write down on that you'd sign for your draw.
Throughout your career, how many places paid weekly or bi-weekly or monthly?
Well, monthly. Fuck. I don't know if any wrestler that would have stuck around that long waiting for a fucking check. Memphis paid weekly. And so did, as far as the Southern territories that ran weekly usually paid weekly. As even when they got bigger, like Jim Crockett Promotions still paid weekly. Even when he got to be bigger shows instead of the old weekly circuit. But Watts paid weekly in Mid-South, but he paid weekly the week before last week. He held back a week on you because if you left owing the standard hotels in the territory like the Alamo Plaza in Shreveport, although actually they should have paid us for staying there. Fuck. But the Alamo Plaza in Shreveport or the Sheraton in Tulsa or one of the hotels, if you owed them money or if you left town owing some kind of bill or whatever the fuck, or having not done business the right way, he could rectify it on your last check and he would mail you the balance. But so if you worked the 1st through the 7th, you didn't get paid for that until the 15th. And that way he always had the last word on you. So you also didn't want to leave with no notice because then you wouldn't get your fucking money because then you'd be fined for unprofessional conduct. If you gave notice, he'd always send that check. But most territories, then TBS, when they bought Crockett, began paying every 2 weeks. But, by then it was for most of the guys, it was on a guaranteed contract payment. So that's the first thing that took the fun out of wrestling for me, to be quite honest. And I know a lot of people say, oh my God, when it went from we're paying you on payoffs to we're paying you a guaranteed amount every week and you'll know exactly what you're going to get, it hurt me deep inside and took the fun out of it for me. Now, possibly because the amount that I was getting paid as a guarantee was less than I'd made on several instances in the past on payoffs. But when all of a sudden your fucking normal check went from $2,000 for that week to $4,200 in Louisiana or $4,600, or you got that $10,000 Starrcade check, or what you saw when you were in the main event on a fucking show that sold out and you saw that pop, that was fun. But a TBS combination of not doing any fucking appreciable business whatsoever at the house shows and just paying the flat money. I mean, we wouldn't have made that much money on the house shows then. Good Lord, no. But that's another thing they took the fun out of in the business for me. I liked when we were doing business and we popped it even further to get compensated for it and see that, oh, what's the check going to be this week? Oh, If I was just a money-grubbing little shit, wasn't I?
How did WWE pay?
Well, goddamn, let's see. Because remember at first, from 93 through 96, or 93 through 95, I was just, they paid me per appearance for the TVs and the pay-per-views, and I didn't make house shows. And then I'm trying to, when I wasn't an employee, which they paid every 2 weeks, but as I recall, yeah, they paid every week. The talent, or maybe, was it every week? I think it was.
Well, when you're coming in and you're working just TVs and then going back to Smoky Mountain, do they pay you the day of? Do they give you a check, or you get something in the mail?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, that's when they started foisting the draws off on me.
Ah.
But no, then also, no, you would get your check later on in the mail. It wasn't that fly by night yet.
What we commonly refer to as the gorilla position. When was the first time you heard it referred to as the gorilla position outside of WWE?
I swear to Christ, I had this. I had written this down because somebody emailed this to me also. Did the NWA have a gorilla position? No, it wouldn't have, because it wouldn't have made any fucking sense, because Gorilla Monsoon never wrestled in the NWA. Here's, once again, in probably the 80s, when the WWF started spending a lot of money on television production, the gorilla position originally was, imagine the WWF Superstars entrance, the curtain, even before they had a stage. They always had a curtain and the light up area, right? As soon as they started having that curtain and that entrance that all the guys came out of on their televisions, on their television tapings, they put right behind the curtain a lunchroom table, 6 or 8 foot lunchroom table with a couple monitors and a couple of headsets, where Gorilla Monsoon and another referee or Bruce Pritchard or whoever happened to be there that they wanted to put in that position would sit, and they could talk to the truck. Vince, that's where Vince loved to hang out. And a lot of times he wouldn't even sit. He'd just stand behind. But that's where the production truck is able to talk to somebody on the ground to tell the wrestlers right there moments before they go out what the fuck's going on, or vice versa, and give time cues and just facilitate in the flow of the program. The NWA had Crockett Promotions didn't really have a position per se, because they shot in so many different arenas and buildings, whether it was Greensboro and it was a big show, and there would be a monitor, obviously, before the behind where you would go out the entrance, but Dusty usually would have a headset in his locker room, and then everybody else would be in the truck. It wasn't as big of a production. And the little small high school gyms, or in Spartanburg, you literally, when you walked out of the locker room, you were walking through the curtain. So there was a monitor in between the 2 small locker rooms they had in this 6 by 6 foot room. And that's the last thing you saw before you went out. So there wasn't even room for a person to sit there. But Gorilla Monsoon started at and popularized that position. So it was known in the WWF as the gorilla position. And even when TBS took over and started doing, more television style television productions, yes, there was a place where guys would go out and a monitor, but it was never had an official name. And because there'd been there was a variety of different people sitting there. So when I went to the WWF first time in 93, it may have been Bruce Pritchard once again, or whoever said to me, well, will you be at Gorilla? And I'm like, what? At the gorilla position. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, we call it the gorilla position because that's where Gorilla always sat. I don't even think Gorilla was still there at that point. In the company, yes, but I don't think Gorilla was still the one at the gorilla position by the time that I learned that it was called the gorilla position. He was the WWF president and doing blah, blah, blah. So no, and actually it's in his honor, I guess, when you think about it, that every wrestling promotion now calls the area at their monitor right before you go through the curtain or the entranceway or whatever configuration it is, the gorilla position. But how many do you think actually know Why the fuck? Because when you think about it on the surface of it, it's called the gorilla position. If you don't know it's because of Gorilla Monsoon, those words have no fucking meaning whatsoever. Like what? The position that gorillas fuck in?
The word position is what was always funny to me there.
Well, yeah, well, and it's another one of fucking Vince things. You know, it's I'm surprised it's not the gorilla facility. Or, you know, or the gorilla championship title or what, you know, whatever the fuck. But that's something Vince would say. Well, you be standing by at the gorilla position. He plans everything like it's fucking Invasion of Normandy. But when these outlaw groups call their spot the gorilla position and have absolutely no idea who it's named for or why it's called the gorilla position, I wonder then, do they ever think, why the fuck am I saying these nonsense words to describe a fucking holding area?
Well, we'll let that hang. We'll see if any answers get sent in. But our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Richard in North Wales. Rip that up. Rip that question up. I assume that's what's happening there. You could be eating it. I don't know.
And well, you mentioned George the Animal Steel. So
that's right. With the recent Lio Rush situation, one piece of speculation and rumor was him refusing to help offer water to veterans coming back from the ring on a European tour. What counts as a veteran in WWE and in wrestling as a whole? What I guess I'm also trying to ask is, when would a wrestler change from a newbie to a vet?
There are no answers to that question. And also, apparently in this context, from what I think from Mark Henry's explanation, it's not just veterans versus rookies or newbies or, you know, whatever. It was whoever is on their first tour of Europe or wherever the fuck it is on the planet that they were at. Whoever's on their first tour for the WWF has to carry the water or the bags or put stuff on the drinks on the truck or fill the cooler up with ice or whatever the fuck it may be. And Lio Rush didn't want to do it because he said it didn't look good to have a black man fetching and carrying for, even though he would have probably been fetching and carrying for other black guys. So I didn't know if there was a fucking rule that, you know, disqualified that or whatever, but it wasn't racial. It's what all the guys do when you're on your first tour. That's one of the things that apparently they have decided all amongst, because the boys come up with this shit themselves. The office doesn't say, okay, guys, when all of y'all are on the European tour, whoever's the first time over there has to carry all the rest. They don't give a shit. It's stuff that the guys do to establish a pecking order. And it's always happened, whether officially or unofficially, in locker rooms or shit. I mean, they've got more time on their hands when they're on these trips now. You know, guys in the territory days used to be in the car with a veteran for 4, 5, or 6 hours. He just shut up and listened and drove and stopped when they needed to piss. There wasn't, and I'm sure he carried a lot of shit in and out of the fucking car, but there weren't a lot of rituals back then like there are now because they have more time and it's a more grandiose fucking travel plan. But the kid comes off like he fancies himself a superstar. He's always getting heat or whatever. And that was one example. And I know Mark Henry had to go through the same thing in the WWF and in OVW. And he certainly can recognize both sides of the issue. And he was on the opposite side of Lio Rush. So that tells me something right there. As far as, you know, who gets to be a veteran and who gets to be a whatever, there's always been instances in the business. You know, when Jerry Lawler was 25 years old in Memphis, he was the top main event guy and you know, drawing as much money as anybody else in any territory. But he'd only been in the business for 4 years, and there were guys that were working in the opening match on cards with him that had been in the business for 20 years, but they weren't drawing any fucking money. So generally, a guy should respect or respects talent that's been in the business longer than they have, which is basically that's, in the old wrestling locker room decorum, that meant you were a veteran. It's all relative. When Lou Thesz would walk in, everybody would drop down and salabim because who the fuck had been in the business longer than him? And it was Lou Thesz. But at the same time, you reach a point where, when you're Dusty Rhodes and you're in your middle 30s and you're fucking flying all over the place and in the main event on everybody's card, a lot of the 40-something-year-old guys that are still making a steady living are going to come in and fucking find you and say hello to you and shake your hand because you're a fucking superstar. So it really just, it depends. And a lot of times problems in the locker room or in the wrestling industry in general have come when some guys didn't have a realistic viewpoint or opinion of where they stood in that bell curve thing or whatever as relates to somebody else that, so there was a misrepresentation there. You get what I mean? Yeah.
When was the first time you heard of Wrestler's Court? Was that something that existed outside of WWE?
No, that was first time I heard of that too. But I have heard it had been taken from other places, but I had never been in on it. There was unofficial, just ribbing and persecution going on in the locker rooms I was in before I heard about Wrestler's Court in the WWF.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brian P. I was watching Halloween Havoc from 1989, and the main event of the card had Sting and Ric Flair versus Terry Funk and the Great Muta in the Thunderdome. My question is, whose idea was it to come up with such a concept in 1989?
Well, actually, I have to take part of the blame for that.
Really?
Well,
the highlight may have been when part of it got caught on fire and the Great Muta actually had to climb up and put it out with his mist.
Well, awesome. but you missed Tommy Young was up there battling those flames with his referee shirt before Muta drowned it in green mist. But when he blowed a red, motherfucker, shit's on. No, it was right about that particular time that I was joining the creative team. It was not my idea, but I did pitch a couple of because I was like, all right, if we're good. Once again, it was a dramatic foreshadowing of the WWF and the Stockholm Syndrome. All right, if we're going to do this, and I remember they were Bruno Sammartino, because Gary Jester had a relationship with him, was going to be the special referee, and we're in a Vince McMahon stronghold for pay-per-view.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
And what a great match that could have been, but they gimmicked it too far, gimmicked it up too much. Even a cage match, right? But Halloween Havoc, this is when TBS was, they were trying to make fucking movies and movie trailers instead of wrestling. And everybody was assured, much like that horrible, awful, terrible, no good, very bad electrified cage match in TNA 20 years later. It didn't work either with the Dudleys and whoever the fuck in St. Louis. It was fucking rotten. TBS assured us, oh, we can do this. And we, at the time, remember this was 1989. So we hadn't yet quite seen through that TBS didn't know what the fuck that they were doing, because we had been told for so long they're a big TV company. So, okay, they can make cages that look like they're electrified, and work, but don't, and all this shit. It took about a year or so for us to smarten up, but they were full of shit as Christmas turkeys. And then came RoboCop and all that other shit, and then it was too late. But anyway, so the fucking... I helped write copy for some of the promos, and I'm not talking about the wrestlers' promos. I'm talking about the promo copy. It's electrified and all that shit. And we really and wrote the TV to sell this big fucking thing. It's going to be a major goddamn deal, and it turned out to be a fucking popcorn fart. The fucking something short circuits. They not only had it electrified some kind of way where only a certain part of it was real electricity, and then the other part. So I don't know what fuck it is. Like the goddamn people that installed my fucking fence gate. They were too smart for their own fucking good. But they also set designed it with all this Halloween shit and witchy shit and burlap and everything. Well, somehow some of the burlap got shocked by some of the fucking electricity and caught on fucking fire before the match even starts. And so then Tommy Young is smacking at the fucking flames. And I remember sitting back at whatever we didn't call the gorilla position back then. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Bruno Sammartino's involved in this. And then Muta goes up and blows the mist. And so he turns babyface, because that was the fucking coolest thing anybody ever saw. And then they have the fucking match and they had to turn it off. And much the same thing happened in TNA 20 years later. I was not consulted, by the way. They'd been doing it in Mexico, so they thought they could fucking get away with it. But they were they were playing a sound effect in TNA. At least WCW didn't play a sound effect. And in TNA, they had to grab the thing and fucking sell while they had the sound effect. But yeah, they were mostly staying away from the electrified cage, and I can't remember what the fuck happened, but it was a goddamn four finger stinker of an abortion is what it was.
Wow. And you weren't there when they electrocuted Abdullah in 91.
Well, no, and they should have fucking known. And I mean, and I'm not saying by the way that the match, because the match still, I mean, those guys, but put it out today, it's the goddamn greatest match you've ever seen, but to have built up what we were trying to do, and it was too far. And no, the whole thing of an electric chair I was gone by then, or I probably would have plugged it in for real, not for Abdullah, but for whoever thought of it. That's so fucking stupid. That's, they got so stupid and show busy. It's the thing about in the first 2 years of ownership, they brought TBS, the electrified cage, the fucking, the electric chair, the goddamn well, help me. What was the other technological marvel? Oh, RoboCop that I just mentioned. Yeah, RoboCop
and that gimmick cage.
And the Black Scorpion.
Yeah.
And the fucking voiceovers and the magicians. And it got so squirrely that people are just, what is this? It's become a parody. And that's why that WCW house show business between 1988 and 1990, the end of that 2 years, was completely dead and never recovered. And so did the goddamn television ratings for 5 years.
I had the magician who played the Black Scorpion in various segments from the fall of 90 on the Superpodcast a while back, Franz Harari, a world-famous magician. He had worked with Michael Jackson and various rock stars. And it's interesting when you hear someone outside of wrestling talk about being around wrestling, what they pick up. Because he's like, oh, yeah, then we went to McDonald's with this really nice guy, Ole, and he told us the whole idea and what they wanted to do. And just picturing Ole at McDonald's explaining.
Nice guy, Ole at McDonald's with a magician.
Well,
oh, Christ.
We've got a few AEW questions this week, Jim, naturally.
Oh, I thought we were going to escape that. Boy, that sub-segment of the population is scaring me now, reminding me of the fucking Patriots and the gun nuts. They're out there, they're hidden out there. And their minds explode when you state the obvious.
Well, some people aren't really taking a side, but they have questions about it. I think this is a case of that. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. Recently, Terry Funk said he believes that AEW, quote, is going to be something special, and also that Dusty would be ecstatic watching this. What are your thoughts on Terry's view of AEW, and is your view of the company as optimistic as Terry's?
I think he watched Cody versus Dustin. And I would agree with both of those statements if that's the only thing I had watched. I don't think Terry tuned in for the pre-show battle royal. That's my comment.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in the
think about that. If you took as we used to say, the tape, I started to say the tape. If you took a video of the Cody versus Dustin segment and set it down to somebody and said, this is a brand new wrestling promotion and it's going to be on TV soon, and this is their first pay-per-view, this is a match from it, and what do you think? There is not a wrestling fan in the world that I can think of that wouldn't say, I want to see some more of this. This is one of the greatest things I've seen in a long time, because I said the same thing myself. If you did the same thing, but it was the Battle Royal that you showed them, I would say better than 50% of the wrestling fan overall, 80 to 85% of the former wrestling fans, if not more, and maybe 10 or 15% of modern fans, because they've got a stronger stomach, would say, I don't want to see more of that shit. On the same show, from same promotion. So it's all relative. And in this case, Cody and Dustin were related.
We have a question about when AEW should air on TV. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Christopher Hayward from the Howard University School of Law. Well, he will be. He'll be graduating in 2021. Per Dave Meltzer, the median WWE viewer age is in the 50s. A whole generation has grown up without Saturday morning or weekend wrestling. While the industry currently benefits from monetizing its niche adult fan base, its greatest opportunity for growth is with kids, since that is when most wrestling fans start watching. In light of the oversaturation of the WWE on weekdays, as well as the opportunity to appeal to younger fans who are asleep during the first runs of Raw and SmackDown, do you think it would be worth it for AEW to run their show on Saturdays, perhaps at 6:05, in order to appeal to the younger audience that their product is seemingly more geared to? If they are stuck on weekdays, do you think they should run on Monday nights, since fans may not want wrestling 3 nights a week and may be conditioned to watch it on Mondays out of force of habit? Thank you for taking my question.
Good Lord, thank you for finishing your fucking question. What? No. That's a lot of detail. Here's the thing. It's completely changed. Syndicated television was the model for wrestling for so many years, because that was the primary method most people got their television. Syndicated television, broadcast over the air, has been important for Ring of Honor because they own the stations. Sinclair Broadcasting owns the stations. So they're getting programming that they would have to pay more or in another way for. But also you establish. See, this is what I've always tried to explain to people. Even if you're on national cable, let's say you have what's a Spike TV, for example. Then that means that you're airing to a large number of people all over the country. But to promote a specific event in a specific market, Spike TV is not all that important. It makes national stars, and yes, and it drives the YouTube and the streaming video and the merchandise and whole, et cetera, but it's not great if you just want to run a house show in Charlotte. And what does come in handy, and why I think Ring of Honor has had some success in some of the markets that they've started and established, because they have actual local broadcast television there. And I don't know if they do use, but they could certainly use, and hopefully they do use, crossovers with the local news station and et cetera, come out and cover the events. That helps you. It doesn't help your profile nationally, but it helps you draw a bigger crowd for a live event or a television taping in that particular market. And I think you need a balance of both. If you're not as big as the WWF, then you certainly need help drawing to your live events where you tape your television so it looks like you have big crowds at your shows. It feeds on each other. But here's the problem. Do kids watch TV on Saturday anymore, on Saturday morning? Do they watch TV at all anymore? I remember when I was a kid, when I was 9 years old, when the Fall Preview TV Guide issue came out, I sat there and was mesmerized and fucking was beside myself to read what all we were going to be, especially the Saturday morning schedule. You know, where's the Herculoids going to be, for fuck's sake? What about Johnny Quest? You know, but now do kids even watch? They just look at their fucking phone whenever they want to, because you don't have to watch anything at a specific time anymore. When I was a kid, if you did not see a television program, but network TV, yes, they'd rerun it in the summer. And when I was a kid, I hadn't figured out syndication yet because it was all first run to me because I was a fucking kid. I hadn't seen it. But a wrestling program or a sports program or a regularly scheduled program that didn't do reruns like network, if you didn't see it when it aired, you never saw it ever. So it's different. Anyway, I think that a strong network and a primetime time slot for a national show is still the best way to go. And I'm open to the night based on, you know what, there are kind of a couple of dog nights for television during the week, but if it's good, it'll make it regardless, because the other shows on that dog night are on the same dog night. So if your fucking dog only draws 1 million viewers and the other networks are drawing 3 million viewers on the same night, that means your TV show sucks. So it's going to be, they shouldn't go opposite the WWF for obvious reasons. Otherwise, I don't think it matters if it's a good show.
How did Herculoids never become a nickname for Hercules Hernandez, who was on so many steroids?
Oh, God damn it. Well, for one thing, I'd have never said it to his face. Now, he'd have probably laughed, actually. He would have laughed. Oh, it's funny, Jimmy. Hey.
To this topic, though, I got hooked on wrestling when it aired in New York on Channel 5 at 10 a.m. on Saturday mornings, noon on Sundays. I would try to watch primetime wrestling. I'd usually fall asleep by the time of the second hour, not because of the matches, but just because of the time it was on. So in terms of getting a younger fan base, there is something there. Obviously, viewing habits have really changed. My kids don't know any television show based on what time it originally airs. Everything's on demand. Yeah. But it's an interesting point.
Well, yeah, and also when I first discovered wrestling, it was on at 2 o'clock in the morning. Dick the Bruiser show. But then I found out there was wrestling here in Louisville, and it was on Saturday afternoons originally. And then Phil Golden's Outlaw show came in Saturday nights at 11 o'clock on the independent station. So, and then sometimes they'd switch to Sunday, especially when they were on the local ABC affiliate here and during the season for games and things. So it was a weekend thing, but it didn't matter whether it was morning, afternoon, or night. The wrestling fans always found a way to watch it. It just, as long as that the only thing that killed you was when the local station bumped you around, where you weren't on at the same time and day every week consistently. If you got bumped around a lot, it was worse than having no TV at all, because it lulled you into a false sense of security. The TV's airing, but Miss Jarrett used to say all the time, wrestling fans are creatures of habit. If you changed the building or the day of the show or the day of the TV or the time of the TV, it would hurt.
Where did it hurt you the most in Smoky Mountain, having the TV bounced around?
Well, we never got bounced around on our main televisions because at the time, Fox 43 in Knoxville, we started at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning and went to 11 o'clock shortly after and stayed there for the rest of the fucking time. They had nothing else to do with that hour, which is we couldn't get a better one because they were pricks and wanted more money. And by that time, Fox Network was a thing, but we were never bounced around. In the Tri-Cities, we were on the NBC affiliate, and we had Sunday morning at 11:30, and we pretty much... once again, it was paid programming, partial paid programming. But the network, thank God, they didn't have anything going on that WCYB in Bristol gave a shit about, and we got that hour, and most of the time we were there. WYMT in Eastern Kentucky, we were Saturday nights at 11:30, except for... I don't know how many weeks it was, but we got stooged by one of the sponsors, one of our spot shows in Eastern Kentucky. we were coming on at midnight and not knowing about it. The station never told us they changed our time because they took a 30-minute paid bowling show from Corbin and put it on at 11:30 and then moved us to midnight and thought we wouldn't know. And we didn't for a while, but we complained. But I think the bowling show went broke. Because I can only imagine what a 30-minute paid bowling show from Corbin, Kentucky looked like. I never saw it, but it was our lead-in. So, I mean, these fucking TV stations, they were motherfuckers in a lot of cases. But we didn't – our main stations, we didn't get bumped around a lot. But also, we weren't in high-demand time slots in those markets.
Well, we have time for a couple more questions here. Let's go from TV to radio. This next one was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Chris Geis. Hey, fellas, were wrestling matches ever broadcast on the radio?
That's it.
That's
okay. It. Well, yes.
Well, that's it.
No, well, obviously, before television, yes, that did happen. And as a matter of fact, Lance Russell said the first wrestling matches, I believe, that he called were radio and actually maybe even radio recreations, might not even been live. But yeah, before television, I mean, after TV came about, TV and wrestling became synonymous for all the reasons we've talked about, because it was easy to cover with one camera. It was easier to do remote wrestling from an arena than football from a field with primitive equipment. It was, you know, the guys were individuals. You could see them on those tiny screens and they still had personalities because of the body language. It clicked. It was a thing. So after that, I'm sure that there were radio broadcasts in the 50s of some wrestling, but I would think that, you know, that after television hit, it quickly went the way of a lot of things in radio. But before television, it wasn't a hit, because think about it, you know, listening to an announcer describe two guys having a wrestling match back when they didn't move that fast to begin with, and there weren't that many ridiculous maneuvers. So it would be kind of slow radio. So I'm sure it happened, but it wasn't a hit. It became a hit when television came along because you could actually see what was going on.
The WWF did it in like 94, right? With Chet Kopic and Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh, good Lord. They did some radio WWF something. And when they did, because Finkel was doing a radio program, Radio WWF, and they were trying to branch out in about the same time. They're trying
Jim
to
Ross.
more radio programming. JR was on it. Yes, he was. But Stump Outthink the Fink. I don't know if it was Stump the Fink or what was the name was, but Outthink the Fink it later became. But that was on there. I did that with him a few times. But Lance Russell did the WCW 1-800 number hotline. Part of the deal was one of the options gave you the live play-by-play of a different house show event, you know, wherever the fuck in the WCW universe, right? Well, Lance discovered that they were having the same cards every night. So they'd send him on the road for 3 or 4 nights to record these play-by-plays. And it was the same guys wrestling the same guys. And then that's when everybody was getting lazy, making the same amount of guaranteed money, didn't respect the office, and they started doing the same matches. So Lance would actually sit there at ringside, and with the sound of the ring and the crowd, he would call a match between two different guys and have them doing different things. But he would just use the fucking, because nobody else, that's the only way they could tell was the crowd, the fucking ring, and Lance, right? And he was so good, he would make those up on the fly just so that the fucking tapes would be different. If any idiot, and there were actually a few, sat there and listened to like 3 hours of fucking play-by-play of a wrestling match.
At 99 cents a minute.
At 99 cents a minute, yeah.
1-900-909-9900, the 9 line.
I had a day on there.
How did that go?
I hated doing it. They said you got to do 7 minutes, and I had to do it on the phone from home call up and record a thing so I would blather through 7 minutes because I didn't think anybody was listening. Truthfully, I don't know how right or wrong I was. I wasn't getting paid any extra for it. They gave you no direction of what to talk about. And so I just usually talked about what we were doing on television and how great we were, even if I had to make shit up sometimes. But it was.
Well, speaking of that noise, our final question this week was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Monsoon Classic. When Ahmed Johnson won the Raw Invitational Battle Royal in 1996, he earned a WWF title match the night after SummerSlam. Because of injury, that didn't happen. What was the original plan at that time? Ahmed losing to Vader? Ahmed losing to HBK? Something else? What was the original plan, Jim?
I don't have a fucking clue. I didn't remember Ahmed Johnson won the invitational fucking, ass grabbing contest or whatever. He was always getting hurt and something was changing, and everybody was always getting hurt and something was changing. I don't know what the original plan was. I don't remember the incident. This must be part of my PTSD from working for the WWE in CONNECTICUT. Do you remember any of that?
I don't remember any of that.
I don't fucking know. And, once again, for about a year there, it started Watts saw Ahmed and wanted to recreate the Junkyard Dog. And once Vince saw that he was, jacked up and 300 pounds, he was fully on board with that. And they tried it for a year, but he was clumsy. You couldn't understand his promos. He became a superstar in his mind. He was injury prone. He hurt people. He was klutzy. He's the kind of guy that could have made a lot of money in the territories because you would bring him in and smash him over for 4 to 6 weeks on television where he just beat job guys convincingly and give him a manager and let him just say a few things, but the manager get the points across. And here, and then it's in Tampa versus Dusty, or in Memphis versus Lawler, or in Charlotte versus fucking Flair, whoever the fuck, and get a hot run as hot as you can for 3 to 6 months, depending on the size of the territory. And then get him the fuck out of there because people are going to see through him. You couldn't make him a durable, long-lasting superstar in a company with that much real talent where they saw him every fucking week for a year or more. That's not the kind of guy that he could be with his limited, what does the kids say, skill set.
On that topic, when they first started pushing him, that was when Bill Watts came in. How much of a hand did Bill Watts?
That.
Did you say
said that? Yes, okay. I said Watts wanted to replicate JYD, and Vince, when he saw his body, was fully on board with that. But the thing is, JYD could talk, and you liked him. JYD, you were scared. The people believed in him. If he was mad, the people would be scared of him. If he was mad at them. If he was having fun and cutting those promos, as I was sitting on the front porch of my good friend Mr. George C. Culkin's house up there in Jackson, Mississippi, we was eating some fried chicken, and you liked him. He looked happy. He had charisma. Plus, he was a hell of an athlete, and that didn't change until he got fat and lazy. But also, he knew mentally what to fucking do because he'd been taught by Ernie Ladd and Bill Watts, etc. They don't pay the dog by the hour. Be explosive. This is kind of thing gets you over on TV. This kind of thing gets you over in the house shows. We protect you in the booking this way. You do this and that. Ahmed had none of that. And then Watts left, and he didn't have, Watts to mentor him. And then all the rest of the guys were, I'm sure, fucking tormenting him mentally by telling him all kinds of shit because he wasn't the most popular motherfucker in the world because he was dropping everybody on their head. And then you remember the fucking Dennis Coralluzzo incident. What was it, a year after his WWF run was over with? Dennis brings him in and books him on a main event in one of his spot shows. And Ahmed Johnson flies all the way from Houston, Texas to New Jersey and checks in his hotel. And Dennis sends one of the Stooges over to fucking pick him up, and Ahmed won't get in the car.
Fred Rubenstein.
And it was even Fred, and that's better than most people would have got, because Fred's a nice guy, and I'm sure had a reasonable car. But Ahmed won't get in it until he sends a limousine. So Ahmed flew from Houston to New Jersey and checked into a hotel that I'm pretty sure that Dennis, didn't pay for. Didn't get paid because he didn't go to work, and Dennis that night told the people why that Ahmed Johnson didn't come to the show, and he was at the hotel and gave the hotel phone number and Ahmed's room number so that they could call him and express their displeasure. So because he didn't get a limo ride to a fucking high school gym spot show, he flew from Houston to Jersey and back, didn't get paid, and got harassed all night because he was a superstar.
I believe they even handed out pencils and paper to the crowd. Anyone who wanted to write down his phone number.
Yes.
And that's why Dennis was the best, quite frankly. But one last question before we wrap things up. This is a quick one, non-wrestling related. This is from Dennis in the Florida territory to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. Jim, have you ever seen or held a copy of Action Comics #1 with the first appearance of Superman? I have a $10 reprint, and I have never seen the real thing.
I've seen it, but I've never held it.
Where have you seen it?
There's, that could be, somebody could clip that sentence, and that could answer all kinds of questions.
There's another T-shirt for Christmas time.
I've seen it, but I've never held it. I've told often I had the opportunity to purchase it one time for $400. But that was in 1970, and I was 8 years old, and my mother was not going to trust me with $400 to buy a comic book from Howard Rogofsky in New York. And then I never let her forget that. Afterwards, every year when the Overstreet Price Guide came out, I'd call her up wherever I was living. She'd answer the phone. I'd be like, $185,000. Yeah, Jimmy, damn it. But finally, I saw one in 2010 or 11. One of the probably 2011, because I went to Baltimore, and when Sinclair was doing the deal with Ring of Honor, and went to the Jeppes Entertainment Museum. And it was I think they've closed it now. I think he's taken his shit back. And Steve Jeppe, he owns part of the ball team there. He's a multi-millionaire, right? And he's got the most incredible collection of comic books and pop art stuff and movie posters and toys and just any kind of, pop art phenomenon of the last 100 years. And I mean, they had those giant 30s movie poster one sheets, 8 by 12 feet that just covered a wall there in these beautiful frames. It was this warehouse in Baltimore that they'd converted in this thing. And you walk into the comic book room, and there was Action Comics #1, Detective Comics 27, All-Star Comics 4.
Jesus.
Sensation 52, I believe. There was, I'm trying to think. This is just in one case. In the middle case, they had 7 comic books that I did quick math. It was like $5 million in this glass case sitting in the middle of the room. And I'm looking around for a fucking brick. And I'm thinking, is it worth it? I could leave Stacy here if they could, the dogs could take her down and maybe I could make it out, but
awful,
and they were in nice shape too. And you just don't see stuff like that. In the same place at the same time. That was awesome. But yes, I have seen it that one time. I've never been able to touch it.
It's almost as rare as seeing Steve Ditko in public.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And as George Carlin said one time, I never fucked a 10, but one night I fucked 5 2s.
Well, I think this episode may be a 2, and it is in the books. There we go. Number 2, all the way. Want to remind you?
I was surly, but it didn't help the program any.
Want to remind you, you can follow Surly Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on.
Of course I am, and don't call me surly. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, does it? Because it's funny when it's Shirley, because Shirley is a common name as well as word has another meaning. But
I don't know how common it is anymore. But yes,
don't call me so. Well, it's like Greta, Ethel, Lola. My Aunt Lola. There's not a lot of Lolas anymore. Thelma is my mother. You don't have a lot of Thelmas, a lot of Lolas, a lot of Ethels, a lot of Gretchens or Gretas.
We're getting away from the old country, Jim.
You don't have a lot of Oles and Svens and Larses and Arns.
Now kids are named after Game of Thrones characters. There's Aryas and Brands and Drogons, I assume, and many others. But we were wrapping the show up. I don't know what happened. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. Of course, you can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. And speaking of your favorite podcasts, don't forget the Jim Cornette Experience debuts each and every Thursday. It is also on YouTube, tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube, search for Jim Cornette. Get episodes of the Drive-Thru, the Experience, complete episodes, as well as clips of various episodes, and the Omnibus Collection, which is going to be growing in the weeks ahead, so stay tuned for more of that.
We have gotten late word from the medical facility that the Omnibus is growing. Yes. The treatments have not stopped it. It's continuing to grow and expand.
Any idea what we're going to talk about this week on the Experience?
Not a fucking clue.
That sounds about right. Also, remember Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com for t-shirts, restraining orders, autograph photos, Midnight Express anniversary autograph photos, burger towels. There's so much stuff I can't even remember it all off the top of my head because so much of it's just weird. But get it all today. Cornette's Collectibles.
Wait a minute. My shit is not weird. My shit is not weird at jimcornette.com. I sell a shirt that says hate is a hell of a motivator and has a picture of me pissing on a guy's tombstone and give part of the money to crippled children. How is that weird?
Your last 3 shirts are thank you, fuck you, bye, hate is a hell of a motivator, and the new Drop Dead or Below Me t-shirt.
No, you forgot Outlaw Mud Show.
Oh, Outlaw Mud Show. That is a little more kind than the other ones. But once again, we have wrapped up. We will see you this Thursday on The Experience. For Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!
Drop Dead or Below Me.